Welcome to this explainer. You know, every time you wake up, glance at your phone, and just unquestioningly accept the date on the screen, you're actually looking at a magnificent human achievement. It's something we all take completely for granted, right? We just kind of assume time has always neatly organized itself into days, months, and years. But actually, that simple digital display is a hard-won victory. Today, we're going to uncover exactly how humanity learned to measure time and how we arrived at the highly precise system that governs our lives today. Let's get right into it. So, what day is it, really? Seriously, think about today's date. When you answer that question, whether it's the middle of July or the beginning of December, you aren't just reciting a random number. Your answer is actually the result of 5,000 years of meticulous astronomical observation, human ingenuity, and honestly, some pretty massive historical shifts. Getting to today's exact date meant surviving drifting seasons, navigating some wild political manipulation, and relying on dramatic interventions by emperors and popes, all just to keep the human world in sync with the cosmos. Section 1. The Dawn of Timekeeping. Looking at the sky. Okay, let's trace this journey. It spans roughly 5,000 years, beginning with our earliest ancestors who looked up and noticed that the sun, moon, and stars actually followed regular, predictable patterns. Those very first observations laid the agricultural roots for the Sumerians and Egyptians. Moving forward, timekeeping required a massive scientific intervention in 46 BC, which literally changed the game. And finally, our journey lands in 1582 with a brilliant mathematical refinement that gave us the global standard we're all using right now. Section 2. Stars, Moons, and Rivers. Survival Timekeeping. You see, early calendars definitely weren't invented for scheduling business meetings or booking vacations. No, they were invented for absolute survival. Early humans desperately needed a way to track the seasons just to stay alive, and early civilizations took vastly different approaches to solving this puzzle. The Egyptians? Well, they tied their timekeeping to the sun and the rising of a very specific star, Sirius. Why? Because it signaled the life-giving flooding of the Nile River. Meanwhile, the Babylonians looked to the night sky, crafting a calendar based entirely on the shifting phases of the moon. What's really fascinating here is how that Babylonian lunar system went on to heavily influence both the Hebrew and Islamic calendars, keeping this ancient astronomical tradition alive for literally millennia. But let's talk about an absolutely crucial number, 365. The Egyptians achieved an incredible breakthrough through their meticulous observation of the stars. They realized that exactly 365 days passed between the annual risings of that star, Sirius, just before dawn. And listen, this wasn't just some fun math exercise for them. This was an essential agricultural survival code. They developed a 365-day solar calendar because it dictated exactly when farmers needed to plant and harvest their crops along the Nile. Knowing this 365-day cycle meant the literal difference between starvation and a bountiful harvest for an entire civilization. It was a real game changer. Section 3. Rome's calendar chaos. Drifting seasons. Now, while the Egyptians were relying on the beautiful predictability of the sun and stars, timekeeping over in ancient Rome was getting incredibly messy. Rome's initial attempt at a calendar was remarkably primitive. It was a meager 10-month system that just stopped tracking time during the winter. They literally treated winter as an uncounted void. King Numa Pompilius tried to fix this chaos by tacking on January and February to create a 12-month calendar, but the system still relied heavily on a lunar cycle that fell vastly short of the solar year. So to keep the calendar from falling entirely out of sync with the seasons, the Romans had to occasionally add extra intercalary or leap months. But here's the wild part. Roman politicians, specifically the Pontifex Maximus, were in charge of adding these months, and they would corruptly manipulate the calendar, adding days just to keep their political allies in office longer or shortening the year to hurt their rivals. This led to absolute seasonal chaos, where the calendar and the actual weather were completely at war with each other. Section 4. The Julian Leap Forward. Scientific Intervention. By the time Julius Caesar came into power, this Roman calendar was in absolute ruins. I'm talking harvest festivals falling squarely in the middle of winter. Caesar knew he needed expert help, so he outsourced this massive crisis to a brilliant Egyptian astronomer named Sosigenes of Alexandria. Sosigenes calculated that the true solar year wasn't neatly 365 days, but roughly 365 and a quarter days. So, to account for this frustrating little mathematical fraction, they instituted a radical new rule in 46 BC. They established a standard 365-day calendar, but with one extra leap day added every 4 years to absorb that leftover fraction. It was, quite literally, a monumental leap forward in timekeeping accuracy. To really understand the scale of this achievement, you have to look at how long it lasted. This scientific intervention was a sweeping, monumental success. The Julian calendar was so effective and such a profound improvement over that old, politically corrupted Roman system that it reigned as the undisputed standard across Europe for over 1,600 years. Think about that for a second. It is incredibly rare for any piece of human technology, or societal infrastructure for that matter, to outlast the very empire that created it, let alone survive for more than a millennium and a half.
Section 5. The Gregorian correction. Fixing the drift.
But as we know, even a great system isn't perfect forever. Over those 1,600 years, a tiny, almost imperceptible mathematical flaw compounded into a major crisis. The Julian year of 365.25 days was actually about 11 minutes too long compared to the true solar year. Now, 11 minutes doesn't sound like much, does it? But 11 minutes a year over 16 centuries absolutely adds up. By the year 1582, the calendar had drifted a full 10 days out of alignment. Crucial religious observances, particularly Easter, were drifting far away from their intended seasons. Recognizing this crisis, Pope Gregory XIII intervened in 1582 with a brilliant, elegant refinement. The new Gregorian calendar simply changed the rules for leap years. Century years, like 1700, 1800, and 1900, would no longer be leap years unless they were perfectly divisible by 400. That subtle little mathematical tweak solved the 11-minute drift and aligned human timekeeping almost perfectly with the cosmos.
Section 6. Timekeeping today, our modern standard.
That brings us out of the history books and right back into the present day. While the Gregorian system dominates global business, government, and secular life, we actually live in a beautifully multi-calendar world. Billions of people still rely on traditional lunar and solar calendars, like the Islamic, Hebrew, Chinese, and Hindu calendars, to govern their religious and cultural celebrations. It's just a powerful reminder that these ancient astronomical traditions, born from our earliest ancestors looking up at the sky, are still incredibly vital to humanity today. Ultimately, this quote hits the nail on the head. Every date on the calendar reflects thousands of years of observation, science, and history. The calendar is vastly more than just a tool to count days or, schedule our modern lives. It's the culmination of humanity's long collective struggle to understand the abstract concept of time, to organize our complex societies, and to maintain a direct, tangible connection with the eternal rhythms of nature. Humanity spent 5 millennia watching the stars, charting rivers, and solving complex mathematics, all to conquer the abstract concept of time. So I want to leave you with this final thought. When you look at the date on your screen right now, ask yourself, how will you use the day that humanity fought so very hard to measure?